And we hold programming and events each month. And so we're really pleased to have you here. This is the first part, and you certainly don't have to attend all of these, but this is the first part of a series. And this is a deep dive into the benefit economy and a discussion around better understanding the components of the benefit economy. And then if you choose to, over the next 4 months, I think that's the way it's laid out, but definitely keep checking our mailing list and calendars, you'll see a deeper dive into each of the tenets of conscious capitalism. So there's 4 tenets of conscious capitalism, and we spend 1 hour session on each of them in this series. And we have done that before, but we didn't actually get to record all of them. So this part is exciting that we'll be able to give this as a little library of resources for our members and people that are interested in the community. And welcome, Bobby. How are you? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. This might be a deeper dive than I am prepared for, but
oh, I don't think so. No, I think you're going to be totally good. Okay. Well, you have a really interesting background behind you, and I've actually seen that same thing this week.
Well, I stole it from the Island Institute.
Okay. And where I saw it was at the hosts, Elise, help me, what do they call themselves? The bigger name, the Ocean Renewable something or other.
New England Ocean Cluster.
Thank you. The New England Ocean Cluster. In their office, Bobby, someone has that on their wall.
Oh, that's surprising.
Yeah, and it's just so funny that was at this week, and I stopped to look at it like, oh, that's so interesting. And then I kind of needed someone to explain it to me, so I moved on. But fascinating that you're sharing that. So thank you for having that as your background. I'm going to share my screen to share a deck with you. But please, let's make sure that this is very discussion oriented, because the size of this group we can really keep this informal and can ask questions at any time. And the deck is just designed to give some visuals to help maybe better understand how everything fits together. And the first thing I'll say about the benefit economy is the reason why it requires this type of session is it's a bit of alphabet soup, so to speak. There's lots of different terms used and thrown around that are kind of misunderstood and are definitely confusing. So we're going to kind of try to dissect that so that you feel a little bit more confident about how this all fits together. And then we'll certainly point out where conscious capitalism fits in that scheme, because that's an important element since this is the Conscious Capitalism chapter. But I think keep 2 things in mind as we talk about this. The movement has been in existence for about 12 years. So this is a movement to change how business is done and really re-engineer the way that business is done in our society. And it comes, and that 12-year time frame is kind of the birth of conscious capitalism, was in earnest the birth of some of these other organizations that we're going to be talking about, where everyone was realizing that there's a different way to do business, and a full-on rejection of what we had accepted as a long-term premise, that businesses were in business to make money for their shareholders. And so it was this recognition that many people had been practicing for a long time of we don't accept that premise. Businesses can do more than make money for their shareholders, and in fact, they're obligated to. And so when we talk about all these different organizations that might feel a little confusing and overwhelming, just remember the basic premise is we are all working in the benefit economy. You might hear it termed that. You might hear it termed conscious business movement, which is all the businesses that are trying to redefine the purpose of business. And you might hear it termed stakeholder capitalism. So instead of shareholder capitalism, which you can think is the past, like we were just in business, capitalism was to benefit shareholders, we're talking about stakeholder capitalism and adding value to all of the stakeholders. And that's the core premise of conscious business or the benefit economy. And everybody's using different terms. It can be super confusing, but if you just remember those key things, it's a relatively new movement, gaining tons of momentum coming out of COVID, because what we saw during COVID is that many companies that would have likely termed themselves not, and very confidently, a shareholder capitalism organization or a profit maximizing organization did things during COVID that they certainly would have likely said in the past they could never do. Pivoting their business in a completely different way, whether that be making vaccines or participating in some part of that process, or making masks or hand sanitizer. You saw all of this stuff happening, providing different types of benefits to employees, having employees have to work from home, all the stuff that everyone would have said, that's not possible. We actually, in many cases, put our society, our community, our employees, and our customers, the other stakeholders, in front of the shareholders, and saw how our economy came together and thrived in a different way. So it was a case of the benefit economy in action. And so what we can all do as voting with our dollars as consumers, or voting with our time as employees, is keep demanding that organizations start to redefine themselves in the way that they started to do during COVID, and not slide back into their shareholder or profit maximizing ways. Welcome, Emma. Hopefully, we're just doing a brief overview. I'm going to share a deck right now, and we can start to go through this in a little bit more detail. Okay, just make sure I've done this right. Okay, so the thing, this looks a little different, so let me figure this. Oh, over here. Okay. So the benefit economy, as I just verbally went over, is a sort of recognition that it's time for capitalism to evolve from a model of short-term profits, where a few benefit, meaning a few, the shareholders, to a model of shared and enduring prosperity for all. So it's about not only being best in the world, but being best for the world. And it's for the benefit instead of for profit. And what's really important to say, though, is that what we're not saying is that companies shouldn't be profitable in the benefit economy, because if they're not profitable, they actually can't do anything more as a company. If you're not profitable, you can't benefit any stakeholder. So it's more that we're trying to think through, how are you using that profit or deploying that profit for the greater good? And that's the basic premise of the benefit economy. And so you'll see it termed lots of different ways. Conscious business, you'll see sometimes business as a force for good. And you'll see many different organizations participating. We're going to spend a little time showing you those organizations. But you have this happening in the investing and investor space with social impact funds, as an example. You have it, as Sandra mentioned earlier, with organizations thinking about corporate social responsibility or corporate responsibility, which is distinguished a little bit, and we'll return to this at the end, from what we're talking about here. It's somewhere on the path, on the journey, but what we're talking about is generally a little bit further down the path, a little bit more advanced than corporate social responsibility or corporate responsibility. We're talking about conscious capitalism, and we're talking about certified B Corps. So you might have heard some of these terms. And we're also talking about benefit corporations. So I'll spend a little time defining what that all means in a moment. But this is like the universe of different ways that we're approaching the benefit economy. And the benefit economy community is a lot of organizations, and this is only a snapshot of them. So you see conscious capitalism in there in the middle. There's an organization called the B Team that's made up of Adriana Huffington and like a whole group of really strong leaders with very successful, Richard Branson. So they've formed this team called the B Team. And then you see some other ones listed there. One that is newer and interesting to take a look at is Imperative 21. Imperative 21 is a collaboration of a number of the organizations that you see on this slide, with the recognition that while it's important that all of these organizations exist and doing their separate work, there's an opportunity to collaborate much more closely together to continue to do the work together. So you may want to check out Imperative 21's site when you have a chance. And then there's certainly B Lab. B Lab is the mother company to the certified B Corp movement. So if you've seen a label on anything on a product, has anyone seen a label on a product saying B Corp before? And did you wonder what that meant? It's kind of like a certified B Corp is kind of like an organic certification or a certification, a LEED certification in the environmental building industry. It's a certification for companies that practice their business consciously, that value stakeholders over shareholders. And it is one way of many ways to demonstrate that you are participating in the benefit economy and participating in the conscious business movement. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Any questions? Just jump in with questions, because when I'm sharing my screen, I can't see everybody. So if you look like you're about to talk, I may not see you. So just come off mute or jump in. Anybody have any questions at this point? Okay. So we have, this slide has a lot of companies in Maine because it's so kind of fun to celebrate those companies. But this is, if you look at the companies that are practicing under conscious capitalism just as a, to put some context to it, has 45 chapters around the world. And we have, so Maine is one of the newer chapters, and many of those chapters have been in existence for a while, and then lots of new chapters coming up. And they operate similar to how we do in Maine, where they bring together leaders in the community to talk about how they are leading their businesses differently and how they are participating in the conscious business movement. And many of these organizations on this slide, particularly those in Maine, are members of the Conscious Capitalism chapter in Maine, and many of them are also certified B Corps. So many organizations choose to do multiple of these. You can think about them as tools. Practicing conscious capitalism is a philosophy and an approach and has specific tenets that you would use as guidance. Becoming a certified B Corp, you go through something called a business impact assessment, which is a very rigorous process, and you have to get a certain score and go through an audit, for lack of a better term, or a deep assessment to determine whether that score is valid. And then you are certified as a B Corp, and then you are reassessed every 3 years. And when you're reassessed, you're expected to get a higher score, or you will not get recertified. So it's the same if you're familiar with fair trade certification or organic certification or LEED certification. It's a same concept of having to go through a process. Organizations have to pay to go through that process, and then have to designate resources to go through the assessment because it is quite rigorous. So on this slide, you have a mix of companies practicing conscious capitalism, companies who are certified B Corps, and then companies who are also benefit corporations. So just to make it super confusing, there's a certified B Corp, which you might see termed as a certified benefit corporation. And then there's an actual benefit corporation. So in the state of Maine, we in September of 2019 finally passed legislation where if you are starting a new business in the state of Maine, you can choose to start it as an LLC or an LLP or an S Corp or a C Corp, some more that like common designations. And what's been added to that is the designation, the legal designation of a benefit corporation. And when you register as a benefit corporation, embedded into your business model, into what's expected of you as a business based on your legal designation, is that you commit to adding value to all of your stakeholders. Everybody following? So when you're talking about this with people, I can almost guarantee you that if you say something about a benefit corporation, they're going to think you're talking about a certified B Corp. And if you say something about certified B Corp, less often they might think you're talking about a legal benefit corporation, because the benefit corporation, the legal benefit corporation, is newer in Maine, and basically not too long after it was approved, we went into a pandemic. And many attorneys in Maine, actually corporate attorneys, who are doing the registration of businesses are unfamiliar with how benefit corporations work because it's new in Maine, they may not even talk about it with their clients as an option, unless the clients are asking. And if you have a legally designated LLC, LLP, or S Corp or C Corp, you can also transition to a benefit corporation. And can anyone think of why organizations would be wanting to do that? Like, what would be the primary reason why you would want to legally designate in that way? We'd love to hear any thoughts about that.
Does it have anything to do with taxes?
Great question. I'm so glad you asked that. No, it actually doesn't. Although that would be, that has been discussed as a potential incentive to be added and has been considered and was not pursued because it actually ends up clouding a little bit the reasons why the movement would hope that an organization designates as a benefit corporation, because there's this authenticity around really wanting to do this work in a different way and be a different type of business. But that's like one of the first questions that leaders will ask is, I have to, if I'm going to transition to a benefit corporation, I have to talk my board into doing that, because that's a board level decision. Is there a tax benefit to doing that? Because it will be easier for me to talk them into it. And at this point, there is not. The reason why many leaders, and these are really different types of leaders that believe in their heart that their business should be run in a different way, would do this, is because it's embedded in the structure of the organization of the business. Therefore, it has a legacy beyond the leader. So if a leader feels really strongly that they should be a certified B Corp or they should be practicing conscious capitalism, all of those things could just go away in the business based on a leadership change very easily. It's like, we were practicing conscious capitalism yesterday and now we have a new CEO and they've decided to do something completely different and they're maximizing profits. And that's kind of the common, they manage their business very traditionally. Or as a certified B Corp, you could decide not to recertify, or you could go through some financial hardship and not have the money to recertify. If you're a benefit corporation, it's a lot more difficult to redesignate as a different legal entity. It can certainly be done, but it would be more difficult. It's kind of embedded. And so leaders do this to embed it into the structure of the business and put a structure around it to make sure they're maximizing value for all the stakeholders. And to be a certified B Corp, when you are approved to be that, you have 2 years to change your designation as a company, as a legal entity, to a benefit corporation, if the state that you're in allows that. So there's 39 states that have benefit corporation designation as a legal entity. And if you are in a state, and Maine is one now, where that is allowed, and you are approved as a certified B Corp, you have 2 years to change your status, or you will no longer be certified. There's a little bit of a caveat to that. If you're an LLC, you have to change your bylaws because there isn't a way to be a benefit corporation under an LLC structure. So that's a little bit more complicated for the lawyers. But generally, the theory, sort of the premise is the certified B Corp movement is trying to embed in the way that we've been talking about into businesses and puts that as a requirement to become a benefit corporation, which makes it even more confusing because you're talking about similar terminology, benefit corporations or certified B Corps. So I always just make sure I say certified B Corp and benefit corporation to designate the two, even though when you write them down, it looks very similar.